So welcome to Fenton High School's FAFSA Ready with Fenton event tonight. My name is Rachel Georgakis, and I am Fenton's College and Career Counselor. I'm very excited to be back with Fenton after taking a year of leave last year. I'm joined tonight by Elizabeth Barrera, who is our presenter from the Illinois Students Assistance Commission. She is an ISAC core member who are, and she'll explain more about what that means, but they're recent college grads who have been really trained in financial aid and FAFSA to help students and families throughout this process. We also have another one of our counselors here with us tonight, Ron Cuellar, and he and I will be managing the Q&A throughout this evening. So we are so sorry that we can't be with everyone in person. We are used to doing these events in person, and we want to make sure that we are still providing the same level of service to Fenton students and families during this time, during remote learning. And so we are recording this webinar tonight. That way, if you need to refer back to it later, if you're not able to attend the whole time, or if you know others who wanted to attend and were unable to, they will have access to it. I will be emailing out links to both the English and Spanish versions to all senior families. They should be posted on the website as well and in the Google Classroom for students. So lots of different ways to access them. Since we're in webinar mode, I just wanted to let everyone know your video is off and your audio is off. So please use that Q&A to ask us questions. We will answer those questions at the end, but please ask them as you have them so that you don't forget. And again, Mr. Cuellar and I, if we think it's something we can answer while the session is going on, we'll answer that for Elizabeth. And if not, we'll leave it for the end for Elizabeth to answer to the whole group. So without further ado, I would like to turn this session over to Elizabeth Barrera from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Like Rachel mentioned, my name is Elizabeth Barrera. I'm with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. Give me 1 second here so I can get this presentation up. And tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about the financial aid process and what that entails. So before I get started, a little information on ISAC. Our mission is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to make help education beyond high school accessible and affordable. ISAC is the College Access and Financial Aid Agency in the state of Illinois. They administer scholarships, grants, prepaid tuitions, and student loan repayment and forgiveness programs. So before we talk about the application process, we're going to talk about a little bit what college actually is. So college is any institution of higher education that awards a degree or credential after high school graduation. So most of us are familiar with that bachelor's degree, that 4-year degree that is most known about, but there's a lot of other things that go into a college education. For example, there is vocational or trade programs that you can do. You can do these at businesses, sometimes offer trade programs. Community colleges sometimes offer trade programs as well. These usually take around 2 years, but can change in time depending on what program the student is partaking in. And then you also have the option of an associate's degree. This is going to the local community college and getting your associate's degree. This usually takes about 2 years for a student. Again, this may take a little bit longer depending on the class load or if the student is full-time or part-time. And then that bachelor's degree is the one you're probably most familiar with, going to a university or institution that offers a bachelor's degree for 4 years. On average, again, this may take a little bit longer depending on the class load or the major that the student has chosen. And then you can also get your master's degree. You can get this at any college or institution that offers a bachelor's or master's degree. This is something that a student would get after completing their master's or after completing their bachelor's, and the master's degree usually takes 1 to 3 years depending on the program that the student is in. So this graphic here just shows a little bit of what the value of a college degree is. So on the left-hand side, we can see that the median wages for a student who pursues a degree after college or after high school goes up with every degree they obtain. So we see that like a high school graduate has like a average, these are just estimates, these aren't actual numbers, around 700, and it just keeps going up and up with the more schooling that they go for. And then we see also on the right hand side that unemployment goes down with the more schooling you go for. So those are two of the main things to think about when deciding whether or not going to get that credential after high school is worth it, because as you can see, your earnings will go up and your unemployment will go down. Again, these are just averages. These aren't exactly what a student may get. These are just averages, but it's good to keep that in mind when deciding on whether if this is the path for you or not. So when you're planning for college, you probably have a ton of questions, and I'm very hopeful that we can get some of those questions answered after this presentation, and hopefully this presentation will give you the information for those questions that you have, such as how much will it cost, what financial aid is, what's the FAFSA, and when do you apply for that. So what is financial aid exactly? Financial aid is any money borrowed, given, or earned that can be obtained from a lot of different sources that help pay for college. Financial aid is supposed to make college affordable for you, and it is intended to make up the difference between what your family can afford to pay for college out of pocket and what the college costs. And I just, as a note here on the bottom, if you think you can't afford college, I would just highly recommend that you think about that twice, because there's a lot of aid out there, a lot of grants and scholarship opportunities, institutional aid for the student, and we're going to go over all of that during this presentation. So just be a little open-minded about that and affordability of college. So there are two main types of aid that you all should be familiar with. There's gift aid and there's self-help aid. So gift aid is money that's gifted to you. You usually do not have to pay this money back. Those come in two forms, and you can either get it in a form of a grant or a scholarship. We'll talk a little bit more about some grants that you get straight from the FAFSA, but you can also get grants from outside sources such as the school itself, or sometimes there are just other fountains where you can get grants from. And then there's scholarships as well, that's free money. The difference between the two is there's usually a little bit more work when that goes into getting a scholarship, because usually it involves an application or an essay, or maybe like some preliminary exams that the student might have to take, just something to verify that the student is applicable for that scholarship. But there are tons and tons of different scholarships out there for students. There are ones if you're over 5'11", if you write with your left hand, just a bunch of different scholarship opportunities. They just require a little bit more work on the students, and but I just recommend that if you can have and you have the time to you get a scholarship and sign up for one and do the essay or whatever it's asking you to do, that you do that, just because you might not get the full amount of grants, or you might only get offered loans from a school. So having that scholarship money is going to be really great, because it'll make up for that difference in your financial need. And then there's also self-help aid. These require more responsibility on the student. So two of those are loans and work study. So loans usually get a bad rep, but there are some great loans out there that students can take out with low interest rates. We'll talk about what those are in a little bit. And then there's also work study. So work study is the most responsibility on a student, but is a program provided by the U.S. Department of Education at institutions that provide jobs to students so that they can use that for whatever they may need in their cost of attendance, or just use it as spending money. So there will be a question on the FAFSA application that will ask if you would like to be considered for work study. If your student or you as a student think that you may want to work during the school year, or maybe you're not sure, maybe you don't know what it's going to be like and you just want to figure it out at first, I would just recommend putting yes for that question, just so that you have it as an option. You don't have to get a job if you put yes for that question. It just gives you the option to have that available to you. It is a campus-based program, so funds may be limited. To find out more about that, you could just contact the institution itself and see if they offer federal work study, and see when is the best time that a student should probably start applying for jobs and getting that in. So there may be priority deadlines for that. So again, asking that institution probably when the best time to get that FAFSA is in, or when to get those applications in. And then just to note with this, compensation is at least the minimum federal wage in that area. So the student will never get lower than whatever the minimum wage is in that area. They'll always get at least the minimum wage. And then a student must earn these funds. So a student must not only put yes for that question on the FAFSA, but they also have to look for a job, which they could usually do at the Office of Career and Services of the school, or they can do it on the school's website. We usually have a page with job offerings. They must apply, they must interview and get the job, and then work the hours for these funds. I really like this program. I recommend it to a lot of my families and students just because they're super flexible with the student. They know that the student is a student before a worker, so they're not going to stress working 20, 30 hours a week on a student if they can't handle that. I know a lot of my friends that did this worked like 2-3 hour shifts throughout the day, or they would do like a 6-hour shift but split it up throughout the day, and they would still get their 10-15 hours a week, or maybe even 20 hours a week by doing it like that. And this just works out a lot better than trying to work at like a Target or Walmart or something like that, because they're a lot less flexible with the schedule and might want the student to work 6 or 8-hour shifts, which realistically, being a full-time student and being a full-time employee is not going to work out. But if you do need the money, this is a great program to look into because it's super flexible with the student's class schedule. So there are different sources of financial aid. You can get financial aid from the federal government or the state government. That is what the FAFSA application is going to consider. They're going to consider federal aid and state aid, but you can also get aid from the institution itself. Many schools provide institutional aid. It really varies from school to school, so getting in contact with that school and seeing if they offer any institutional aid will be super beneficial for you. And usually on the school's website, there's a tool known as a net price calculator. You can search that in the school's like search bar on their website. Again, it's called the net price calculator, and that will help you see how much institutional aid, if they offer it, you may be eligible for prior to getting that award letter from the school. And then also there's outside and private sources. So this would be like if you go to Sallie Mae or Chase Bank to get a loan, but there's also other sources like maybe your church offers some scholarships, or the YMCA, or places like that, just that aren't affiliated with the government or the school, where you can get aid for college from as well. So these are your two must get to know sources of financial aid, because these are the ones that are going to be on your FAFSA application. So ISAC, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, as I mentioned before, we do administer scholarships, grants, prepaid tuition, loan repayments, and forgiveness programs. So you can visit their website at isac.org. They're going to have a ton of useful information for both the parents and students. And then also the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid. They administer the federal programs. We'll go into what those are in a second here, but you can also find more information about what they offer on their site at studentaid.gov. So there are two big grants that a student will be considered for when filing their FAFSA. One of them is the MAP grant that comes from the state of Illinois. ISAC administers this grant. Here it says you could get estimated up to $5,340. That was for this year. Again, this is an estimation. It's a need-based grant, so it depends really on your financial need, how much you're going to get from this grant. One thing to note with this MAP grant is that this grant can only be used at MAP-approved institutions. There is a list of those MAP-approved institutions on ISAC's website, so you can double check to see if a school that you're applying for takes the MAP grant. You can definitely check on that site, isac.org, to see if it is a MAP-approved school. And then there is also the Pell Grant, which is the largest grant. This is awarded by the federal government, the U.S. Department of Education. They award this grant. This is also need-based, so here it says up to $6,340. Again, this is an estimation. You could get some of this, all of this, or you might not get any of it. It really just depends on your financial need and what information is provided on your FAFSA application. So here's a list of these are all of the programs that the Illinois Student Assistance Commission awards to students if applicable. So like I mentioned, that MAP grant, which is need-based, again, so that's be based on your financial need. They have an Illinois Veterans Grant, National Guard grant, a grant for dependents of police, fire, and correctional officers. If you think that you may qualify for any of those grants, to find out how much that award is and how to apply for that, you can find that on ISAC's website at isac.org. And then we do have some teaching programs that they award grant money for. So just for example, the MTI award, it says that you could be awarded up to $5,000. So these are for students who are planning to go to school for a career in teaching or education. So if you or your student thinks that they might want to do that, they could definitely apply for these awards. The only thing to keep in mind with these grant programs is that they do have a teaching commitment. So if a student takes out, say, the MTI for 1 year, after they graduate, it will be expected of them to teach for 1 year. So if the student takes it out for 2 years, it will be expected of them to teach for 2 years after graduation. Also to note with these grants is that things change, right? People change their mind. Students change their majors all the time. I changed mine like 6 times. So I get it. Like, you may think that you want to go into education, but then you change your mind and you don't want to do that anymore, but you already took out this grant. That's totally okay. They're not going to take away the money. The grant will just turn into a loan. So instead of not having to pay back, say you took it out for $5,000, instead of just being gifted that $5,000, when you graduate or leave the institution, you will then owe that $5,000 back. And then you won't have that teaching commitment anymore, of course, because you're not doing your program in teaching or education anymore. Just so to keep that in mind with those. And then the U.S. Department of Education also has some similar grants. The Pell Grant that I mentioned is the largest one that you can get. They have also a grant for veterans and a Teach grant that's very similar to the other two that I mentioned before, and it also has that teaching commitment with it. And then also just like work study and an education opportunity grant. So when we're talking about this FAFSA and all these grant and scholarship opportunities, it's also important to know about loans, because it'll probably be the case that you might have to take out a loan depending on what the school offers you, and they will probably include loans in their award letter. It's really important to know the source of the loan if you take out a loan. So if for any reason you need to get information on your loan or change your repayment option or anything that you need to change about your loan or need information about, knowing the source of your loan and that point of contact will be super important for this. So don't just, if you do take out a loan, don't just take it out and forget about it until graduation, because there will probably be a time where you need to discuss with someone in regards to that loan. So just make sure that when you take out that loan, you know where it's coming from, and you also know who to contact with questions regarding the loan. And then also, you should know the interest rate of that loan. So you don't want to take out a loan that has too high of an interest rate. Like I mentioned earlier, the FAFSA will offer you a couple loans that have a pretty low interest rate. But again, if you don't want to take those out and you want to take it out from a private source, that's totally okay. Just make sure you're looking at that interest rate and choosing a loan that best suits your financial position, and you're not taking out a loan that has way too high of an interest rate, and because that will cause you to struggle in repaying it back once you graduate. And then also knowing your repayment options. So some loans will let you go on what we call a deferment, which is just a period of time where you don't pay your loan. Some loans have like a 6 months deferment, a 60 days deferment, and some loans will require you to start paying them back right after that graduation date or whenever you leave the institution. So make sure that you know what your repayment options are and the grace period, if there is a grace period. So also there's going to be usually loans, if you're not contacting them, they will just put you on a standard repayment option, and usually this is they're just basic, like 120 days or whatever it is, repayment, but not always is that the best option for everyone financially. So making sure you're looking at that repayment option and seeing that that's the best one for you. And if not, knowing that point of contact so you can connect with them and see how to change that or what your other options are. And then also knowing if it's subsidized or unsubsidized. So the biggest difference between a subsidized and unsubsidized loan is going to be when that interest is occurring. So with a direct subsidized loan, it is need-based, so not everyone will get offered this loan, but if you have a higher financial need, you will maybe get offered this loan. And the interest on this loan will be paid off by the government while you are at least a part-time student during your grace periods and during deferment. So with the difference between that subsidized and unsubsidized is, I like to say that unsubsidized has that you at the beginning. So you are responsible for paying the interest on that loan. It will occur as soon as the loan is dispersed. So for example, with the subsidized loan, say a student takes out a $1,000 subsidized loan, and they've been part-time the whole time, nothing has changed. When they graduate or leave the institution, they will owe $1,000. And then with that unsubsidized loan, the student, if they take out $1,000, when they graduate or leave the institution, they'll owe $1,000 plus that interest that has occurred over time. So there will be options for the student to, with the unsubsidized loan, to pay the interest while they're in school, so that when they graduate, they'll just owe whatever they initially took out. But sometimes this doesn't work out for students financially, and they need to pay for other things, or they just don't have that income to pay for the interest, and that's totally okay. Just keep in mind that that interest will be added on at the end when you graduate or leave the institution. So that's the greatest difference between those two, is just that when that interest is occurring. So there are other federal loan programs that the government provides. Like I mentioned, that subsidized is need-based. It has an interest rate of 2.75 fixed and a grace period of 6 months. And that grace period is, like I mentioned, just that time until you have to start paying the loan back. A direct unsubsidized loan, it's not need-based, so everyone will get offered this loan no matter what your financial need is. It also has a 2.75 fixed interest rate, and also has a grace period of 6 months. There is also something called the Direct Parent Plus loan. This is offered to parents of undergrad and graduate students. It's unsubsidized, so again, this will be offered to everyone. It's credit-based and taken out in the parent's name. It does have a little bit higher of a interest rate at 5.3% and a grace period of only 60 days. So if you do decide to take this loan out, just make sure as a parent you're comfortable with the amount you're taking out and making sure you're not taking out too much. Because especially in that first year, if you're noticing that a school for a school, you might have to take out a bunch of loans. Do keep in mind that if in the first year you're taking out a bunch of loans, you will probably have to take out a bunch of loans that second, third, fourth, fifth, and however many years are to come afterwards. So if you can avoid taking out the Parent Plus loan, go for it. But again, also sometimes you need to, and just make sure you're comfortable with that amount as a parent and taking out that loan because it is under the parent's name. And then there is also an unsubsidized loan for graduate students as well. It has a higher percentage, but this is offered to students as graduate students because they no longer will be offered that subsidized loan once they finish with their bachelor's degree. So there is a max that you can take out on the loans. You can't just take out however much you want. For first year dependent students, it's going to be $5,500 for that unsubsidized loan. And then the subsidized is going to be $2,000 less. And then for independent students, it's going to be a little bit higher on that unsubsidized, but the subsidized stays the same. And then every year after that, each of those loan amounts will go up $1,000. So just keep that in mind when thinking about taking out those loans, because again, like I mentioned, you might not get what you need just from the grants or institutional aid, and you will have to depend on loans. But keep in mind that there is a max that you can take out on the loans. So yeah, just keep that in mind when you're looking at that and deciding what loans may be best for you. So getting into the financial, the FAFSA itself, to be considered for student aid, the FAFSA is the first step. And communicating with the college to find out what else you might need to complete an application. There is also the alternative application for undocumented and transgender students. We'll get into that a little bit more. And then there's other forms that the institution might need from you. So for the FAFSA itself, it is a free application for federal student aid. It's the first step usually in getting that financial aid from a school or from the government. The FAFSA is used for state and federal aid programs, and then schools use it also to look and see if they can offer you any institutional aid. And as it says in its name, it is free, so you should not be paying to fill out this application. If at any point it is asking you to pay, you're on the wrong site. You should be visiting FAFSA.gov, and it should look like this image here on the right. It should be this blue screen, and it's going to ask you if you're new to FAFSA or if you're returning. For most of you, at least for your students, you should be new to FAFSA. However, if you are a parent that has already had a student go to college, and this is not your first rodeo, then you'll be returning. But again, this initial page is just asking from the student's perspective. And if at any time you do need help filling out this application, that is what I am here for. I am a free service for you guys to help you fill out this application and answer any questions that you might have in regards to the application. So there are people that will offer you help with the application at a cost, but I am the free service that your school has to help fill out this application. Like I mentioned, there is also an alternative application for qualifying undocumented and transgender students. If you think that you may be qualified for this application instead of the FAFSA, there will be some preliminary questions that will see if you qualify to fill out this application. This application is only for state financial aid, as it's administered through ISAC and not through the federal government like the FAFSA is. Again, colleges will use this application to see if you qualify for any institutional aid, and this application is also free. This application can be found on ISAC's website. So the site for this is isac.org/alternative app. There you can find those preliminary questions that I mentioned, as well as other information regarding this application. And just a reminder, your students should not be filling out both of these forms. Actually, they won't be able to fill out both of these forms, as they shouldn't. Either they will be filling out the FAFSA application, or they will be filling out the alternative application. And then if they don't qualify for either, unfortunately, they won't get any governmental aid. They'll have to do that. I know there's a new FAFSA mandate this year, but they'll have to get that waiver to opt out if they can't do either of these applications. But hopefully your student can do the FAFSA or the alternative application this year. So just some information on when to do this 21-22 financial aid application. It will open on Thursday, October 1st, which is in 2 days. So I just want to note with that parents do not have to complete and submit the FAFSA the day of, okay? Most families think that they won't get all the money that they need if they don't complete it on October 1st. That is entirely false. We do suggest, I like to say getting it done before Thanksgiving is a great time, because after Thanksgiving, you kind of fall into that like winter break. It's usually the end of semester for students and they're worrying about exams, and then they have winter break. So I say get it done before Thanksgiving. There's really no difference if you do it October 1st or if you do it November 1st. Just getting it done as soon as possible is recommended, because that MAP grant and Pell Grant do have suspension dates. So if you wait too long to do these applications, say you wait till February or March, the MAP grant might get suspended by then, or you might not get as much money as if you were to have done it in November. So just make sure that you're getting that application done as soon as possible. And then high school seniors and college students should be completing the FAFSA. You do have to complete the FAFSA every year you are in school. So it is not just a one-time form. You will do it every single year, and you will fill it out with different tax information every year. You can find the FAFSA application on FAFSA.gov. And as I mentioned before, you can find the alternative application on isac.org/alternative app. And then again, this application is just used to determine eligibility for federal and state aid programs. And then schools use this to determine if the student is applicable for any institutional aid that the school may offer. So if your student is a dependent, they will need parental information. Most students must report parental information until the age of 24. For the purposes of FAFSA, there are only 3 types of parents. That's biological parents, adoptive parents, and step parents, only if they are married to a biological parent. No one else should be providing information on the FAFSA or alternative application. For purposes of the FAFSA, legal guardians are not considered parents, and you will not need to put your information on the FAFSA. If the parents are divorced, you will report the information of the parent who the student has lived with most in the past 12 months. If that time is exactly the same, if your student has been with dad 6 months and has been with mom 6 months, then you will report who has provided the most financially for the student. So information you're going to need for the FAFSA only, you're going to need a social security number. Parents who do not have a social security number will put all zeros. You'll need an A registration number for non-US citizens, and you'll need an FSA ID to sign it electronically. I'll go over what that FSA ID is in just a second. For both the FAFSA and the alternative application, you'll need your 2019 tax returns, 2019 W-2s, and other records of income. You'll need banking statements and records of investments and assets, if you have any. You'll need records of untaxed income, because it will ask about that, if you have any. And then you'll need the list of colleges that the student would like to attend. Just to note with this, the student can put up to 10 colleges on the online FAFSA application. Again, if a student is applying to more than 10 schools, that's totally okay. You'll just wait a week or two for that FAFSA to get processed, and then you can go back in once the institution has gotten your information and take off of the school and put another school in. That's only if the student is applying to more than 10 schools. If the student is applying to, say, 3 schools, and then they later decide they wanted to add another school to their application, they don't have to erase anything. They can just fill it in that 4th spot. There's no need to erase any schools, only if you're applying to more than 10 schools. So the electronic signature, for the FAFSA, it is known as the FSA ID. Hopefully you guys have set that up already. If you haven't, I highly recommend getting that done within the next couple days, because it does take a couple days to get processed. The FSA ID is used to sign the FAFSA electronically. It's also used to get the FAFSA application opened up. You'll need to log in using this FSA ID prior to starting the application. Students and parents should have their own FSA ID. So students should create an FSA ID using a personal email address. Do not use your current high school email address on there, because that's going to expire. So make sure you're putting your personal email in connection to that FSA ID, and then a parent should be creating an FSA ID as well. If you have had students already, or you have students in college now, or they've already been to college, you'll be using that same FSA ID that you used with your other students. So hopefully you still have that information. If not, you can try to recover it with hopefully an email that you attach to that, or a phone number that you attach to that. And for the students as well, they will be using that same FSA ID every single time they fill out the FAFSA application. So just make sure that you're keeping that in a safe spot, maybe putting it in your notes in your phone, so you can have that for you every single year. The FSA ID is needed to renew the FAFSA every year, like I just mentioned. And parents who do not have a social security number can obtain, they cannot obtain an FSA ID. However, that's totally okay. You can just print out the signature page at the end, have the parents sign it that way, and mail it in. For the alternative app, it's pretty similar. However, it's noted as a PIN. So a PIN will be needed to sign the alternative application. Again, students and parents should have their own PIN. The only thing needed for this PIN to be created is an email address. And once you do that, your PIN will be sent to you by ISAC. So keep an eye out for that if you have to do that. And then you need that same PIN to renew your alternative application every single year. So again, just keep that in a secure place. Make a note of it in your phone. Put it somewhere it's not going to get lost. And then, like I said, parents only need an email address to get that PIN for the alternative application. Again, you should just be doing one or the other. You should not be doing both. So on the FAFSA, there's going to be a tool known as the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. If you are able to create an FSA ID as a parent or as a student, you will be able to use this tool to import information from your taxes directly onto the FAFSA application. This is a great tool as it removes that time that you have to manually input the information. So it'll ask some questions, and then it'll import your tax information. It'll double check that everything is correct, and then just put that on the form for you instead of having to manually type that in. If you can use this tool, I highly recommend it, as it removes any room for error, and it also will decrease your chances of being selected for verification. And I'll talk a little bit about what verification is in a second. But yeah, the student can also use this if they worked in 2019 and have filed their taxes. They can also use this IRS data retrieval tool to make that process just a little bit easier for both of you guys. So the FAFSA will take all that information from your income and your assets, and they will create an EFC, which otherwise known as your expected family contribution. This amount is what a student and family can be expected to pay out of pocket for college in one academic year. They use this EFC to determine a student's eligibility for federal and state aid programs. So like I mentioned, there may be a process that you have to go through known as verification. This is just a process that schools use to make sure that the information you provided on your FAFSA is correct. So it's just like they're just checking twice that everything is correct, and they have all the right information for your student. If you are selected for verification, don't worry, it's a super common process. A lot of people get selected for verification. The school will just request some additional documents from you, maybe your tax return transcripts, W-2, or members of your household. Like I said, don't be alarmed. It's a common process. Provide only the information they're requested, and make sure you're submitting those documents on time. So if you are selected for verification, this will kind of halt your FAFSA completion. So you want to make sure you get those documents that the school is requesting in a timely manner, because once you finish verification, that'll complete your FAFSA application, and then they can start to send out those award letters to you. Be in contact with the school, see when those deadlines are, and so that you can get those documents in if requested from the school in time. So how much does college cost, right? What is that cost of attendance? So there are things that we refer to as direct and indirect expenses. Direct expenses go directly to the school, and then indirect expenses are usually coming out of pocket. So the main direct expense is tuition and fees. Also, a direct expense could be room and board, depending. If you are living on campus, that would be a direct expense because you're paying the campus directly to live there. But if you aren't living on campus, if you're commuting, or you have your own place, that would be an indirect expense. Transportation, also an indirect expense. Gas money, if you're taking the bus, books and supplies, if you're buying it from the bookstore, or you also have outlets like Amazon and Chegg, and then other miscellaneous expenses, such as if you're buying lunch on campus every day, or whatever else you may be spending in regards to school. So the college is going to take an estimation of all of these, aside from tuition and fees and their on-campus living expenses. Everything else is going to be an estimation, and they're going to calculate that all, and that will be the cost of attendance of the school. This is also referred to as that sticker price that you see for a school. And the financial aid office at that school will take the cost of attendance and your EFC to find out what your financial need is. And we'll take a look of an example at that in a second. So like I just said, the financial aid office at the school is going to look at the cost of attendance of the school. They will subtract your generated EFC, and that is how they will find out what your financial need is and what aid they can award you. So just for example here, taking a look at, let's say, College B. So for example, in College B, let's say this is U of I. So your student's cost of attendance at U of I is $20,000. Again, that's that sticker price that you see. Say your EFC is $3,000. They'll subtract 20,000 from 3,000, and so your financial need comes out to be $17,000. The school will look at that $17,000 and they will try their best to compile an award letter that hopefully will meet that financial need of $17,000. As you guys can see, the EFC does not change from college to college. That is because what is expected of you to pay out of pocket doesn't change from school to school. That's just what you can afford according to the information provided on your app. On your FAFSA. The only thing that will change from school to school is the cost of attendance, and the financial need is going to change from school to school. So once that happens, once the school looks at all the information, you're going to start getting financial aid offers. So like I said, the financial aid administrator at the college will look at all that information and will package an aid and send that to you. If you're applying to more than one school, which hopefully your student is applying to more than one school, you'll probably get a bunch of award letters and they're all going to look different. Unfortunately, they don't all look the same, but they, for the most part, have the same information. So it might get a little hectic looking at all of those, and you might not know what to look for. So you can definitely use the studentportal.isac.org/findaid to help you and decide which college best fits you financially. On that website, you can compare up to 3 schools at a time. If you're applying to more, just go ahead and use the worksheet a couple times just to see. And when you're looking and comparing those financial or when you're comparing those award letters, you really want to look at, was your financial need met, and what types of financial aid were included? Is it more grants? Is it more loans, or is it half and half? And then what the out-of-pocket cost is. You don't ever want to pay too much more than what your EFC is, because then it might become a little, it might cause you to struggle a little bit financially. So just keep an eye out for those things, making sure that you're finding that best fit college financially for you and your family. Some tips and reminders for you guys. Again, the FAFSA does open on October 1st, this Thursday. So if you can go ahead and get it started on Thursday, that's great. If not, you have plenty of time. Like I said, getting it done before Thanksgiving is a really good date. The information that you provide on that FAFSA is confidential and will only be used to determine your federal aid eligibility. Again, you may be selected for verification, so you might need to send in additional documents to the school if they request that from you, so keep an eye out for that. You may need to turn in any other forms for the school after submitting your FAFSA, making sure you're keeping track of those deadlines. So deadlines for whether that's the application is due, or when those documents for verification are due, or any additional documents that the school might request from you. It might be useful for you to keep a copy of the things that you send into the school, just in case they, for whatever reason, lose it, or they say that they didn't get it. You'll have that copy there for you, so you can either mail that in again to them, or let them know, like, hey, I did send this in. I have a copy right here. Maybe you can look it up this way. And then, just as a reminder, you do have to reapply for the FAFSA every year that the student is in school. So here's a little step-by-step of what you guys should be doing: completing the FAFSA or alternative application, reviewing the application data, completing verification if you are selected, receiving and reviewing those financial aid offers. Again, hopefully doing that on that studentportal.isac.org site. Responding to colleges. Make sure that you're not only responding to the college that you will be attending, but also responding to the colleges you're not going to go to. Completing all those pending processes that the school might have for you. And then again, renewing your FAFSA or alternative application every academic school year. So here's that picture of that site that I mentioned. They have a bunch of other resources other than just comparing your award letters. You can search for scholarships on there, help with financial aid, money management, information on careers and jobs, and then they have a bunch of great worksheets for planning for college. So here's a list of websites that I mentioned throughout this presentation. That's studentportal.isaac.org, studentaid.gov handles the federal side. FAFSA.gov is where you're going to find the FAFSA application, and then isaac.org/alternative app is where you'll find that alternative application and information on the alternative application if you need that. If at any time you guys have any questions, of course, you can reach out to me. But also, if you just want to shoot a quick text to someone, I believe the area code closest to your school would be that 630-216-4910 number. This is just like a hotline. We have a bunch of experts on the other side waiting for your questions. Feel free to shoot them a text. Again, this is just a text thread. Don't call this number, so no one's going to pick up. But if you have a text question that you want to just send over text, you can definitely text them, and they will be more than ready to help you. And that is all the information that I have for you guys tonight. I hope that you found this presentation useful, and hopefully I answered some of your questions that you guys might have had prior to this presentation. Again, my name is Elizabeth Barrera. This is my email address and my phone number. Again, I am your school's ISAC representative. I'm here to help you with the FAFSA application and also anything in regards to the college going process and life after high school. So feel free to contact me through email, or if you want to call me or text me, there's my work cell number, and you can reach me anytime, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And again, thank you so much, you guys, for coming out tonight and listening to me share information on the financial aid process. I hope you all found this very useful.
Great. Well, at this point, we just want to open it up for some questions. Elizabeth, thank you so much for all of that information. I know that even though I do financial aid every year, I feel like I learned a few new things, especially with the alternative application being in its second year. So we did have two great questions already come through the chat that I answered, but I wanted to just make sure that everyone was aware of. The first one had to do with if your 2020 income is less than your 2019 income. And I think we're going to see that. We see that all the time, but especially this year due to the pandemic and due to lots of families having income loss or job loss or different medical needs that took up more income possibly, that income that you are putting on the FAFSA, because it does need to be your 2019 income, might not look like what your family's financial situation is now. So Elizabeth, can you talk a little bit about how a family might handle that with their financial aid process?
Yeah, so definitely contacting the financial aid office at the institution directly is going to be your best bet at this, because the FAFSA is only an application. There's nowhere to put a note or note extenuating circumstances that you may have, whether due to COVID or anything else. So once you submit your FAFSA, I would just give a couple days for the school to get your information processed and follow up with their financial aid advisor and let them know. I'm sure this year they've dealt with that a lot already, so they'll probably have a lot of useful information and help for you guys. They will definitely take this into consideration and look at your award package a little differently, maybe give you a little bit more award money or offer or give you offers for something different that may help the student, because yeah, we're going to see that a lot this year, that income is going to be a lot different than what it was that previous year. But schools are aware of this and they have the information to help you guys. Definitely just reach out to the schools itself and let them know that that is the case for you.
Great. And that's definitely something very common that we see at Fenton all the time. And every school has their own process for how you would do that, like Elizabeth said. And usually it is just some extra paperwork for you showing. So if that has happened to your family and you have a letter showing that someone was laid off, hold on to that because that might be something that a school asks for. They might also look for more recent pay stubs that show a decrease in income versus prior pay stubs. And so that can be something else that can help with that process. Another great question was about where you can get your FSA ID for your electronic signature.
Yeah, so I think you linked it in the chat, but that fsa.ed.gov site is where you're going to do that FSA ID. Like I mentioned, if you guys have not created your FSA ID yet, you can go ahead and create that either tonight if you'd like, or you can wait till tomorrow. Just know that it will take a couple days to get processed. So if you do it today or tomorrow, you might not be able to open and start the application on the 1st. But definitely if you do it today or tomorrow, you should be able to do it by Friday, if not this weekend. So just make sure that you guys are doing that and keeping that FSA ID, like I said, in somewhere secure because you will need that for every following academic year. But yeah, if you guys can't see it, it is in the chat. But I think you guys can all see the chat. So it's in there. You'll go there and again, you'll create one for the student and you also create one for the parent so that you both can sign that FAFSA electronically.
And just another quick. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Cuellar.
No, I just wanted to say I want parents and students to understand that besides Elizabeth, your student counter is a resource, and I want to reiterate you should not be paying for any service that is providing you. If you have any questions or you have a need for some help, your sons are happy to set up a time to that helps.
Mr. Cuellar, you were kind of breaking up for me. I don't know if anyone else heard it, but it was a little breaking up. But I think what Mr. Cuellar was saying, just in case the audio, and it might have just been my house, my Wi-Fi's been really super fun with 3 people working and learning from home. So what Mr. Cuellar was saying was that, do not pay for any services. Anytime you have questions about that, that is what Fenton counselors are here for. And in a moment, I'm going to drop actually I'll put a slide up that shows a way that you can make appointments with us for that. But I want to go back to the FSA ID just very quickly because we only have a few minutes left in this session. We do want to be mindful of time and keep it to an hour and be respectful of your time as well. And so for the FSA ID, we've been doing Bison Time sessions with seniors pretty much almost every Monday as a counseling team. And so yesterday I live streamed to talk about financial aid with students. So all of your students should have some knowledge of financial aid. We did not go, to be honest, in as much depth as we did tonight because we wanted students to attend tonight and we knew that this is more geared towards parents and we didn't want them to be too overwhelmed. Next week though, on Monday, if students have not yet created an FSA ID, there will be an opportunity for them to do so during Bison Time where we will walk students through that process of how to create their FSA ID because both the student and the parent need their own individual FSA IDs. And only one parent needs that FSA ID, not both. So just a reminder for that. And so if you're there the same time as your student at 11 a.m. and you want to be walked through that process, jump on to their Bison Time and watch that process with them. We would love to have you and to walk you through getting your FSA ID as well. So like Mr. Cuellar said, we are going to be here to really help families file the FAFSA. In non-pandemic times, we would have FAFSA completion nights and you would be able to come to the community room or to the ARC and we'd have tables and families and students would sit down and be able to file the FAFSA with help from Fenton counselors and representatives from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission like Elizabeth. So what we've done in this virtual setting is created FAFSA appointments for you to make an appointment with a Fenton counselor. We've all been trained on doing the FAFSA. I help families. Typically, I file at least 100 to 150 FAFSAs every year with students and families. And so counselors, we have been trained in this as well as Elizabeth to help you through this process. And these will be individual meetings. They will be over Zoom so that we can use the screen screen share function, but it'll just be between you, the counts, and whoever you sign it up for. So it's not, you will not be sharing your information with anyone else. And you can make an appointment by going to bit.ly, so bit.ly /FHS FAFSA, and that's a Google Doc that will show you everyone who is available for a virtual FAFSA appointment. I will be emailing this out to all senior parents to make appointments as well, but I wanted to give you that website if you want to make one ahead of time, because it will go out in an email tomorrow. And it also shows language preferences. So we have counselors that speak both English and Spanish with availability for the FAFSA. So that's all I wanted to show you there. Other than that, I don't see any other questions that have come through the Q&A. So we just really want to thank you all for being here and for doing everything that you're doing. We know that planning for after high school is really stressful in normal times, and during a pandemic, it's just a lot more for students and for parents. So any way that we can support you through this process, please reach out, and have a good night. Bye.
Bye, everyone.